Hey everyone, James Reeves with TFBTV, and you knew this one was coming. 7 reasons why the AR-15 is better than the Steyr AUG. Last week or two ago, I did 7 reasons why the Steyr AUG is better than the AR-15, M4, M16, so on. Today, we're doing the rebuttal. And a brief note before we get to 7 reasons why the AR-15 is better than the AUG. Guys, bear in mind, these are tools, these are toys, these are inanimate objects. Every time I do a set of these videos, you get people saying, oh my God, I can't believe you think that this gun is better than that gun, and I'm sorry that you have a small PP. Seriously, comments are like that. Like it's the wildest thing ever. Guys, we're talking about guns. Guns are supposed to be fun. I am not related to Gaston Glock, although I wish I was. I didn't say the Pledge of Allegiance to the AR-15 every day at Catholic school when I was a kid. And I guess most importantly, the AK-47 isn't playing the AR-15 for my kids' college tuition money every Saturday and Sunday during the fall. So what I'm trying to say is, I'm not personally invested in these, and you shouldn't be either. In other words, if somebody says that a gun that you like sucks, that should be okay. I mean, at least you shouldn't shit your pants over it. That's just my personal opinion. I could be wrong. And for that matter, speaking of personal opinion, I hope you guys liked that in the last video, I relied on an Australian Army, a government report for all of the pros of the AUG over the AR-15, because I mean, the AUG, the A1 AUG just wiped the floor with the M16A2 in those tests, if you believe them. So I'm not presenting my opinion, I'm presenting data for you to consider, and there's always going to be countervailing data. Point being, when I do one of these videos, I'm giving you reasons why this gun might be better than that gun, and there's going to be a set of reasons why the other gun is better than this other gun. You can take almost any 2 guns, and you can come up with at least a few reasons why one is better than the other. I mean, at the end of the day, you know, usually one of them's cheaper, right? Anyway, stop being a bunch of weird pussies getting your feelings hurt about guns, and let's get into the list. Number one kind of sets the base layer. I'm just gonna say the M4, even though you guys know you have the AR-15, the M16, the M4, the Mark 18, all these derivatives. I'm just gonna say M4 to keep things simple. But this is gonna kind of set the foundation for the other 6 reasons, and that is widespread adoption of the M4 versus the AUG. So look at these lists. I love these little lists on Wikipedia where they show you what countries have adopted a certain gun. I think these are the funnest. I just love browsing these lists. You look at the M4, the list for the M4. There are more countries that have adopted the M4 than have potable water coming out of their plumbing. You look at the Steyr AUG, who's adopted it, a bunch of stuck-up countries in like their slave colonies or whatever. So not a whole lot of people adopting the AUG. Just because more countries use the M4 than the AUG doesn't necessarily mean that it's better. No, not necessarily. But there's going to be some, at least, kernel of truth in there as to why this one is preferable to that one. Last video, I used the Australian Army's evaluation of the AUG versus the M16, which go back and look at that report. I mean, really just look at the synopsis if you have to, because there was a ton of data and it was incredible. It was actually, believe it or not, a lot harder to find quantitative, qualitative data for the M4 or why it was better than the AUG for this video. But one place I did look was to New Zealand. And why? Because I knew in 2018, New Zealand took the LMT Mars rifle and they replaced their AUGs with M4s. So I poked around the New Zealand Defense Major Projects Report for, I think it was 2018, but I'll drop some links just like I did last time. All my citations, all my sources, I'll drop links in the description. So why did New Zealand switch from the AUG to the M4? Well, unlike the Australians, it seemed like the New Zealanders hated the shit out of their AUGs. I mean, God, look at this report, this news report that I found. I mean, it borders on hysterical. It's like, no thank you for your decades of loyal service to the Commonwealth, or whatever they call it in New Zealand. Take you and your non-adjustable stock and your quick change barrel and get the f out, is basically get lost, don't let the door the doorknob hits you in the asshole on the way out, goodbye. And the funny part is they even have a couple comments from New Zealanders who posted in the firearm blog, the blog that owns our YouTube channel, in their comments of these guys saying, yeah, this gun sucks. I hate it. So I thought that was especially hysterical. Then the punchline is, yeah, we could probably sell them for like 500 bucks each, but we're just gonna go out and burn them like garbage or FN pistols, you know, just trash. We're gonna just melt them down or whatever. We're not even gonna try to give them away or sell them. It's sad. Even the Australians, who were so high, I mean, look at that report. They are so high on the AUG, and a lot of the commenters and viewers out there, and myself, I love the AUG. I think it's a great rifle. A lot of people do, but even special forces in Australia are using the M4. So I mean, it's like, if your gun's so badass, why are you using our gun, huh? But if you look back at the Cove, it was an article I cited in the last video written by somebody with a military background, the Australian Army, where they talk about the differences. It's a very pro-AUG website. They gave some caveats for why Australian Special Forces use the M4. First, using Steyr magazines and having a common manual of arms if you're going to be interfacing with other special forces, especially like with the United States and your allies who all use the M4. Okay. I will note that you can get an AUG that accepts Steyr magazines, and that's the one I have, and I still prefer it, but it has no bolt hold open, which is a massive pain in the ass. So you got to manually rack it, and then on top of that, I find it's a little bit picky, and sometimes my AUG, I've got some B-roll here. Every now and then, if I use the wrong magazine, if it's a magazine it just doesn't like for whatever reason, I'll use one P-mag, it'll work fine. I'll use another P-mag and it like won't strip the last couple of rounds off the top of the magazine. You got to charge it a couple of times. The Cove also mentions that Special Forces find the M4 desirable because there's the ability to customize it to make it mission specific very easily as compared to the AUG. And if you need to order like a small batch of parts or just a small run of items, there are going to be more of those available, say like some particular thermal optic or something. You're going to find more of those that are going to interface with the M4 than you are the AUG. And that gives us a great little segue into our number 2. That is modularity, and that is perhaps the greatest asset of the AR-15 or the M4. This is perhaps the most modular gun ever designed. The modifications that you just as an end user can do at home or on the battlefield or whatever, they're virtually limitless. I mean, almost an infinite number of combinations for how you can set up an M4 or an AR-15. I've always said it's a little bit like Lego, but for men. Assembling an AR-15 or an M4 is easier than putting together like little Billy's SpongeBob bicycle on Christmas Day. While the AUG does have some degree of modularity in that quick change barrel that you can just pop right off in a matter of seconds, it isn't like the AR-15's any slouch in this regard. You don't need basic tools in order to change the upper. So you can have the same gun legally. You can have the same gun with the same serial number. That is your lower receiver. And all you have to do is pop these two little pins right here, pop those out. Your upper comes right off. You can slap a new upper on there. You can change calibers. You can change barrel lengths. You can change operating systems. You can go from 223 to 300 blackout to 458 SOCOM and even still use the same magazines. All you got to do is just pop a new upper on there, which takes seconds. You want to be able to mount accessories? No problem. With the right handguard, you can probably get over a yard of accessory mounting space in front of the charging handle. Looking back at that New Zealand procurement report, they really were attracted to this feature of the M4 as well. They said the major technical advance in military rifles over the last 20 years has been the move to open architecture. I like that. They call it open architecture. I think that's cool. This allows for easy mounting, optimization, and replacement of sophisticated sights, day and night sights, along with ancillaries such as laser aiming devices. These give much greater accuracy and intrinsic capability of the rifle, allowing it to be effectively exploited across the full range of combat situations. New Zealand again shitting on the AUG, saying continuous operational experience with the Steyr highlighted key issues. The greatest deficiency was the ability to effectively detect, recognize, identify, and engage targets at the requisite ranges. Improving this required advanced sighting systems, which could not be fitted to the Steyr, as its closed design architecture does not allow this. So essentially what they were saying is their main issue with the AUG is that it was not effective for them because of the inability to mount accessories to it. Interesting. Moving on to the number 3, cost. The New Zealanders in their major projects report, it specifically references that the M4 was much less expensive. For that matter, they said Defence had previously considered the Australian Defence Force F90 version of the AUG as a proposed future rifle in lieu of an upgrade. But this approach was not supported because, first of all, the cost of 3,000 new rifles was higher than the amount approved. And bear in mind, they bought almost 10,000 of the LMT. So I don't know what they were talking about, what that price difference was, but it sounds like it was pretty substantial. But who cares about what the government pays for guns? Because that's like pretend money, right? They just pick it right off the money tree. I want to talk about what you or I pay for it. An AUG is going to set you back 2 racks, homie. That's going to be $2,000 if you want an AUG. Now, in my opinion, worth every penny. But it's kind of hard to sell a lot of people on that when you can get a perfectly functional AR-15 for $400 or even less. And I know what you're thinking, James, I thought you said that the only people that buy $400 AR-15s are meth dealers and people with Bible verse tattoos. Yes, you are correct. That's 100% correct. However, you have to bear in mind that if you can buy an entry-level, semi-functional $400 AR-15 for $400, think about what you can get for $1,500. You can get a top-of-the-line like Bravo Company, an LMT like the New Zealanders did, Noveske, Daniel Defense, all top-of-the-line ARs, and you still have money for a good reflex optic and a case or a half case of ammo before you even get to $2,000. Number 4, ergonomics. I know there are going to be some people out there who are going to make an argument that ergonomically the AUG is just as good as the M4. I've seen some compelling arguments. I've seen some guys on video that can really handle the shit out of an AUG, but I feel like it's almost universally accepted that the M4 is just better. Having the magazine up here and allowing you to get to everything in your little workspace here with the M4 is just better than the AUG, especially if you have to do a magazine change while you're prone. Manipulation of the M4 just tends to be faster. Even the Cove article mentions that the forward placement of the magazine permits the inclusion of magazine release functionality, a well-placed bolt catch, conveniently placed fire selector switch, and a tame case ejection pattern far from the shooter's face when shooting offhand. Like I've said with the Steyr AUG, if you have to switch to your left side to shoot from your weak side, your ejection port's going to be right here, and you're going to get what I like to call brass bukkake. But as you see here with the AR-15, you've got the ejection port well in front of your face, and you've got a case deflector right here that's just going to bounce those rounds off to the right. Adjustable stock, can't do that with the AUG. That's a big deal because you're looking at a one-size-fits-all situation with the AUG. It is relatively comfortable if you're a relatively average sized person. I imagine if you're too big, if you're too small, if you're wearing body armor, that's really going to limit your enjoyment of the shooting experience with the AUG. The New Zealand report laments the fact that the AUG can't be adjusted for body armor. Lifting directly from the report, it says, a parallel advance in rifle technology is the ability to make the rifle adaptable for different body sizes and the wearing of different personal equipment such as body armor. A rifle that can adjust to different users is easier for the individual to have confidence in and use effectively. Both the lack of and desirability of these characteristics has been reinforced over the last decade of operational experience, including in Afghanistan, where New Zealand service personnel have been exposed to combat conditions. Speaking of combat conditions, let's move to our number 5, reliability. The M4 is indeed combat reliable, contrary to popular belief. Is it more reliable than the AUG? Perhaps, perhaps not. But there has to be something said about the actual combat reliability of the M4 based on reports from soldiers out in the field. In the past 10 years or so, there have been calls to replace the M4, people saying that it's unreliable. But when you actually look at the data, it's a surprisingly reliable rifle that it seems like service members are very happy with. In December of 2006, the Center for Naval Analysis released a report on U.S. small arms in combat. They surveyed 2,600 troops who fired their weapons at an enemy target. 89% of M4 users reported that they were satisfied with the M4. 90% of them were satisfied with the handling characteristics, such as handguard size and weight. Again, you're talking about ergonomics there. M4 users had the highest levels of satisfaction with weapon performance out of all the small arms available to the US military. including 94% of them being happy with accuracy, 92% of them being satisfied with range, and 93% of them being happy with rate of fire. 19% of M4 users reported a stoppage in combat, but 82% of those stoppages were mere tap rack bang issues. In particular, they said that it had little impact on their ability to clear the stoppage and re-engage targets. 81% did not need their rifles repaired in theater. 80% are confident in the M4's reliability. 83% confident in its durability. So 90% of users in the theater, in combat, in Afghanistan, with moon dust everywhere, they're happy with the M4, and 80% of them said that they are perfectly happy with the reliability of the M4. Would those numbers be different if they were using the AUG? Maybe, maybe not. In fact, the report that I referenced in the last video seemed to indicate that the short stroke piston system in the AUG was much more reliable than the M4, but many of you were quick to point out in the comments, my good buddies, Ian McCollum and Carl Casarda, their in-range TV video, they did 2 mud tests with the AUG and they did one with the AR, and in their testing, the AUG seems to be much less reliable when exposed to a lot of mud. And whether or not that's a realistic test or a realistic exposure, who knows, but it's worth talking about. Accuracy. You guys just heard me say that according to this survey that the military put on, almost 95% of troops that used the M4 were happy with the accuracy and the range of this gun. And for good reason, because the AR-15 is pretty much the gold standard in terms of accuracy. You're talking about a gun that's precision machined, that has an excellent trigger. Even the standard GI trigger is not really that bad. And using the direct impingement gas system with a gas tube and no moving piston, no moving components alongside the barrel like you have with the Steyr AUG or the AK-47. You don't have a gas tube or a gas piston vibrating the barrel while you're shooting, and it's very easy to free float these guns and improve the triggers if you so choose. While the Steyr AUG is no slouch in the accuracy department, my personal AUG, I've tested it before and I've mentioned this in videos, maybe I think a review I did about a year ago, where I can squeeze around 2 inches at 100 yards. On the other hand, it's not uncommon for an AR-15 that costs half as much as a Steyr AUG to be a 1 MOA gun, that is 1 inch at 100 yards with the right ammo. 0.85. Well, shoot. 0.798. So not only do you have less reciprocating mass from a piston, but you also have this massive buffer and buffer spring that also reduce felt recoil, thereby making the gun more accurate for the end user. The single stage GI M4 trigger is already pretty decent out of the box, and any idiot without hand tools, maybe a punch if you wanted to, you can change the trigger out to something much better for not a lot of money. Not really the case with the AUG. I think the trigger is better than most people make it out to be, but I'm not gonna sit here and pretend like you can compete with the M4. The AUG trigger being so far forward to the rest of the fire control group, you basically need a long rod, a trigger linkage or a trigger bar that's going to connect the trigger that you're actually pulling with your trigger finger to the rest of the fire control group at the back of the gun. That pretty much universally means that Bullpup triggers are just not going to be nearly as good as their standard traditional trigger counterparts. And of course, the New Zealand report I've been referencing throughout this video backs up these observations about accuracy. Very interesting. In 2018, when the New Zealand Army held their first rifle qualification with the Mars L with the M4 made by LMT, they recorded that twice as many troops qualified for the highest level marksman grade versus the Steyr AUG from prior years. Essentially what they're saying is mo troops shot mo better with the M4 over the Steyr AUG. So I love the AUG. I think it's more accurate than it gets credit for. I think it's got a better trigger than it gets credit for, but M4 wins. Finally, where the M4 has the Steyr AUG soundly beat weight. You wouldn't think this, but the Steyr AUG is actually a pretty heavy gun. Old Freddy Fatass here weighs 8.2 pounds in standard configuration using plastic sights, no optic. This is the AUG A3 M1. Hell, you could probably have a 16-inch AR-15 with like a full rail, an optic, maybe a flashlight, and a light suppressor, and you're gonna come in around like 8.5 pounds. You would think that made with this much plastic, the Steyr AUG wouldn't weigh as much as it does, but you're looking at a gun that weighs a little bit more than average and comparing it to a gun that weighs a little bit less than average. The Steyr AUG weighs a little bit more than average because you've got things like this integrated vertical foregrip and, most importantly, the prime offender being the gas system. So you've got you have all this metal gas piston, gas tube. You compare that to the AR-15 and the operating system, the chief operating component for it of the bolt carrier group is a little metal straw. All right, guys, there it is. So 7 reasons why probably my favorite long rifle, the M4, is better than the Steyr AUG, which has got to be really close in the competition for number 2. But remember what we talked about at the beginning, boys and girls. We're not going to have our feelings hurt by guns anymore, right? So AR-15, guys, am I back in the cool guy club yet? Can we be buddies again? Can we talk? Am I out of the doghouse? AR-15.com. Guys, thanks a ton for watching. That I've got to say, I've had a hell of a good time making. I love digging through these reports. By the way, guys, if you have access to like government evaluations, test reports, stuff like that, please send it to James at TFBTV. I love looking at this shit and making videos. Speaking of send it to me if you got it, you got cash lying around, help us out, guys. We are shill-free, unbiased. We don't take money from manufacturers in exchange for good reviews like 90% of the gun channels out there. It's so tempting. I would love to be like, oh, hey, Olight or whomever. Yeah, cut me a check for $6,000 and I'll say that your thing is awesome. I wish I could do that, but we don't do that around here. We're 100% honest with you guys, and the reason why we can afford to do that because you support us at subscribestar.com or at patreon.com/TFBTV. Find us on Subscribestar Patreon. Send us $1 a month. If you send us $5 a month or $10 a month, you're automatically entered into a drawing to win a gun. We give away 1 gun for every 500 patrons. At the time you're watching this video, between Subscribestar and Patreon, we've got 1,500 supporters. That means we're giving away 3 guns a month, and that's only going to increase the more support that we get. Guys, thanks again for watching. I hope you enjoyed this video series. Stay tuned, subscribe, hit that little subscribe button. Stick with us, we're gonna bring you more. Take care.